Aisley. Of storm restoration. We're coming up now right on about 72 hours of working to get customers back on. I think everybody knows on Friday the 14th around 4 o'clock in the metropolitan area, earlier in other parts of Kansas, we had a very large storm system come through and take out power for a cumulative right around 240,000 customers. At its peak, there were 186,000 customers that were without power. As we sit here today, again, about 72 hours in, we are sitting at about 96% restored. There are still right around 9,000 customers out. Of those, though, only 7,500 are actually from when the Friday storm hit. We have had the unfortunate luck of having weather come through our service territory yesterday afternoon and be here for about 3 or 4 hours. And then late this morning, we also had some storms and rain hit the Wichita, Emporia, and northern part of our service territory in the Kansas City metro, and that took out about another 1,500 to 2,000 customers. Of those 2,000 or so that are out, about 1,500 are still out as we sit here right now, making for a total out right now of around 9,000 customers. As I said, 96% restored, and as we sit here today, we have 3,000 men and women, really from all over the Midwest, 2,000 from Evergy and 1,000 from neighboring utility companies, Wisconsin, Indiana, Oklahoma, Illinois, Arkansas, the eastern and southern parts of Missouri. They're all here to help. There's about 1,000 of them, over 2,000 vehicles. Like I said, it's about 3:30 right now, and as we sit here, we have about 80% of the customers who are without power they've been assigned, meaning that there are active line crews and tree and vegetation crews that are working to fix the problem that is impacting them, fix the problem that is causing the outage, and to restore power to the folks that are left. I think by midnight tonight, we should expect at least half of those customers to be picked up. But just a word of caution, this is the time of restoration where it's really getting down to hand-to-hand combat. Yesterday morning, we talked about the fact that the numbers were going to start to slow down a little bit. The reason for that is when we fix a problem at this point, sometimes it's only 5, 10, or a handful of customers. Now, yesterday we got some customer comments online that said, well, I'm a part of an outage that has 50 or 60 people affected, and there are some larger outages that we're still working, but the vast majority right now are very small outages with specific and localized damage, and it just takes a lot of manpower to only bring on 2, 3, 5, a dozen customers. So it's going to slow down, and it will absolutely go into tomorrow. But we think we will be at 97 to 98% restored as people go to bed this evening, and then we'll be looking to clean up everything tomorrow and end this restoration. Hopefully. There's still some weather that could come in later tonight. Anytime we get an electrical storm or we get rain, that necessarily slows down restoration. But again, right now, I think we are looking at getting most people on tonight and probably cleaning up most of the rest tomorrow morning and into the afternoon. With that, I would be happy to take any questions that folks have, and just appreciate everybody coming out to get the information so that we can get this information out to our customers.
Chuck, it's probably a challenge sometimes reminding customers that you want the electricity back on as much as they want it back, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, look, we get it. Everyday life depends on electricity, and so if you don't have electricity, you're not getting things like air conditioning, you're not getting things like your internet that impacts school, that impacts work. Today's society really does depend on electricity. We want you to have your electricity on. We're doing absolutely everything we can to make sure that happens.
Can you tell us about the priority list, how that works? Because we heard some customers still say on oxygen that don't have power, and how you might go about it if there is a priority?
Absolutely. Great question. So, first of all, we always try and get critical infrastructure up first. What's critical infrastructure? Well, it's wastewater and water treatment. It's hospitals where to make sure we can have people who have medical emergencies, they can get treatment. It's public safety like fire and police, things of that nature. We also try and work on communications because cell phones these days, they're a part of life as well. Past that, we always work the large parts of the system first. As you drive down the major streets to get here today, you'll see larger poles and larger lines. Those lines are the backbone and the laterals of our system. To get power into the neighborhood, those have to be up and running. And so many times, when you get something like that fixed, it's going to bring on 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 customers. So we always do those first. And then it's back down into hand-to-hand combat. It's going into the neighborhoods and trying to restore where we've spotted damage. One of the things that is slowing down this restoration in particular is the fact that many times we have found obvious damage on some of those larger lines. We go to turn the power back on and it blows a fuse again. And the reason that it blows a fuse again is because in somebody's backyard there's a snapped pole or there's a tree on the line or there's brush that we just hadn't seen until that moment. And so what will happen is we'll send the line crews somewhere else to start fixing another problem, and then the tree crews will come in. That can be very frustrating for customers because what they see is the lineman going away, which is very frustrating at this part of the restoration. But actually what that means 9 times out of 10 is we found vegetation somewhere. We have to take care of that vegetation, and we're sending the lineman somewhere else to restore somebody else. And then as soon as that tree damage is cleared, we'll bring the lineman right back and try and turn them on.
What percentage of the power outages were caused by tree damage? And the reason I ask, because I've got a follow-up question to that.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So I don't have a percentage. I couldn't tell you the breakdown of what was tree damage and what was wind damage. But the two main factors causing outages in this storm were straight line winds that snapped or damaged poles. And we know they had to be in the 90 to 100 mile an hour range. Otherwise, poles don't snap, lines don't come off. And then trees and branches getting into our system. And, we had over 500 broken poles. I would say probably half of those had vegetation in them. The other half, they couldn't sustain the sheer winds that we had in some areas of the service territory.
Who's responsible for maintaining that utility corridor, that easement?
So we're responsible for maintaining that utility corridor and that easement. And I'm glad you asked that question because this is probably one of the things that we hear the most from people over the last 72 hours. And that is, if they just trimmed the trees better, then we wouldn't be in this situation. So I would say two things to that. First of all, we're right now going to the 72-hour or third day of this restoration. And so 362 days out of the year, tree trimming, and why didn't you trim more trees is exactly what customers want to hear. The other 362, if we come near trees and parkways, backyards, things like that, it's probably the least favorite thing that we do with customers and the most contentious. And so we have a plan, and that plan is to take anything out of the supply space where the lines actually run. But in storms like this, what that will not do is prevent whole trees or giant branches from being lifted up and thrown into lines. Tree trimming more would not have kept this outage at a lower number. It would not have kept this outage from being longer. We had snapped poles that didn't have any trees in them, and we had a ton of damage from entire trees rooted up and gone into those lines. And so we maintain, tree trimming is one of the things, one of our biggest budget items. We do it almost 365 days a year, except for when it's really, really cold or the weather won't let us do it. We, of course, after a storm like this, will look at our tree trimming practices to see if there's things that we can do better. We also use predictive analytics to take a look at where things might be growing faster and trim a little more aggressively there. But tree trimming is not what caused this outage. For the first time in 5 years, we've had nearly 250,000 people from an every 5 to 10 year storm.
Chuck, are you worried about the storms possibly tonight setting some of this back and like more outages?
Yeah, absolutely. So we got some more outages today. We got a few more outages in the middle of the afternoon on Sunday. One of the biggest things that the storms cause is whether or not they cause more damage, they definitely slow us down. When there is lightning that is in the area, then you're not going to want linemen climbing up into a pole or a tree or getting in a bucket truck. It creates an extremely dangerous situation. And so, for example, on Sunday, we had the storms that were in the metropolitan area for about 4 hours. Now, some folks are saying, well, it was just rain. Can't you work through that? And the answer is yes. But if there's lightning within 10 miles, then we're not sending men and women up into bucket trucks and trees to work on the lines.
Tell me
Chuck,
about
I did talk
communication with customers. We had talked with somebody earlier who says, I don't know what's going on. Tell me about methods of communication, and are they working?
Sure. So the methods of communication is a great question. So we try and use every method available to us to communicate to customers. But what customers really want in a situation like this is very specific information that has to do with them. Not outage generally, not my area, but when is my house going to be on? And that is something that even the folks sitting in the control room can't tell you. And I'll give you a very good example. So we've got some folks in the Prairie Village area and in the Leawood Hills area that got with the mayor and got with a mayor, got with an elected official and called and said, look, we just really need information. So we did our very best to give a spot estimate and say, you know, this is the nature of the damage that we've seen, and this is approximately when we think we'll get you back on. And guess what happened? We cleared all that damage up, we re-energized the line, and of the 400 or 500 that were out, about 200 came on, and 300 people were very disappointed because 2 blocks over in somebody's backyard, a piece of a tree had fallen on the lines and shorted out the rest of that circuit. And it's been going on and on like that the entire time. And so as a result, we can't text that to you. We can just tell you you're out or you're on. We can tell you you're assigned or not assigned. In the beginning of a restoration, we can't even tell you that sometimes because we're moving so quickly that we don't get it entered into the system quickly enough to get that information out. We actually turn it off. We use social media. We use the help from you guys, actual media. Our website is updated, and we've been sending out emails and also posting on our outage map. So we try and do as much as we can, but what people really want is, when am I going to be back on? The questions we get are, I'll try and find a hotel if it's going to be more than 12 hours. Should I worry about my food or not? And the simple fact of the matter is, if you were my best friend in the whole world and I wanted nothing more than to get you on, I wouldn't be able to give you any better information than what we put out now.
That's the other part of this is there's the education piece as far as people go. Does the power company, do they have the power of eminent domain when it comes to cleaning stuff up like this? Because I did run into a crew that was visiting from another state graciously here, giving us their time to fix the problem. And they said that they had a tremendous issue with one specific homeowner that would not allow them to access what was wrong, what was fixed. So what can neighbors do? What's Evergy going to do? What's the education piece here that people need to understand? There's no reason to be like that.
Yeah, so I would say we do have the right to go and to access we have easements that allow us to have the right to access what we need to in order to fix a problem and to restore an outage. That said, nobody wants us rolling trucks over their lawn. Nobody wants us being heavy-handed, and so we try our very best when we interact with a customer like that who's hesitant to have us in their yard, to do our very best to reason our way around it, but sometimes that does slow things down. I will tell you, that is another thing, I'm real glad you brought this up, because that's another thing that's made this difficult. A lot of the damage has been done in what you would think of as bedroom communities. These are just residential areas where you have lines that go across back property lines. What you'll see in those situations is, instead of taking one of these big trucks you see behind you and fixing a line, yanking out a pole with machinery and then putting a new pole in, oftentimes what we have to do is go back there, just with men and women who have manual equipment to either trim the trees or to replace a pole, that's just a lot slower than using heavy machinery. But if we take a truck like that weighs several tons and we pull it into your backyard, even if we could get the access to do it, it's going to tear up your yard pretty good. And while we'll do everything we can to try and remediate that, it could be weeks or months, and people just aren't happy when that happens. So many times in this storm restoration, we've been going into backyards, and it's just men and women climbing into trees and poles and doing the work manually, which just takes time, and it takes a lot of people too.
On that individual home basis, correct me if I'm wrong, is there a priority list for medical needs that people could have registered before the storm? And if I assume you're getting those calls now, and
yes.
are those people still in any line, or are they just basically registering for the next storm?
So yes, if people call and register now for our medical list, that's not going to really impact the restoration in this storm. As I mentioned, we've got 80% of the outages assigned, so by the time we get you into the list, it's probably not going to have much to do with this storm. Having said that, if you rely on oxygen or other medical equipment, we encourage you to do a couple things. First of all, let us know. You can, on our website, evergy.com, you can register for our medical list. What that will do is a couple things. One, when we see weather coming in, we'll let you know. So we'll say, we think we're going to have outages. There's a strong chance. If you're using oxygen, you might want to get an extra tank, or you might want to make preparations to go somewhere should we have a prolonged outage. The second thing we do is we do note that in our file, and to the extent we can prioritize those customers, we do. But there are thousands of customers on that list, and if we prioritized all of them, then we wouldn't be running a restoration. We'd be running working just the medical customers. And again, most of the time, you've got to get the lines on the main roads done first with tons of outages associated with them just to get back into the neighborhoods and things like that. So the medical list is helpful. It's not a solve-all. What it will do is get you a little bit more proactive and specific communication before, during, and after a storm.
Now, it's probably going to be
let me get him over here real quick.
You would know when the last outage might come back on, obviously, the storm. What's the commitment? It sounds like it's tomorrow or something.
Yeah, we think we're going to get everybody who can receive service. We think we're going to get them on tomorrow. Like I said, about 80% of the outages right now are assigned. So roughly 7,500 out of the 9,000 are assigned. We think the work on many of those is going to continue through the night and into the morning, but probably about half of them, maybe a little bit more if we get lucky and don't get more weather, will get redone this evening. And then we'll clean up everything else tomorrow. Now, there are people who have damage to their house, damage to where electricity comes and connects to the home, or might be very special circumstances where we just have a ton of damage. But for the most part, we expect that tomorrow, barring additional storms or something we can't foresee now, this restoration will be, for the most part, completed.
It's probably 7 to 10 days, I would bet, before you guys are ready to do a debrief amongst yourselves. But is there going to be a commitment from Evergy to be transparent about that debrief with the public, the good, the bad, the ugly, the wins, the losses, and the takeaways for next time?
Absolutely. So after every restoration like this, we do exactly what you said, which is an after-action report. We probably won't start on that for a couple weeks. Many times in a restoration effort like this, you get everybody back on, but a lot of times what you'll see is we've just made temporary repairs. So for example, you might be driving down the street later tonight and see a piece of a pole hanging in the air, suspended by lines. That's not a permanent repair. That's just to get the power back on. And so once the restoration is over and everybody's back on, we're going to send out the same resources, and they're going to spend the next week to 3 weeks making permanent repairs where we just did a quick repair, hardening the system again. About that time is when we'll start an after-action report, and that after-action report goes to both of our regulators in Missouri and in Kansas, and to the extent that they put that through a public process, that is something that is available to the public, as is almost everything we do.
Chuck, go ahead and highlight the work your crews are doing. I mean, you've got people from all over the state coming to help. This is a huge process. They're working long hours, at least 16 hours. Just go ahead and highlight how much work they're doing to get people's power restored.
Yeah, so as you can imagine, I mean, you're talking about the real heroes, right? There are a couple groups of folks that really deserve all the praise here. First, I'd like to highlight the linemen and women. You know, they work in hot conditions. They work 16 hours a day. They work in very dangerous conditions. Many times you have generators in houses that could be backfeeding onto the grid. That's a concern. Many times you're working in and around storms. That's a concern. And then, of course, it's just heavy equipment. And, you know, these guys try and work. We tell them slow and safe because we don't want anybody getting hurt. But there's not a man or woman out there putting on power that doesn't feel the pressure to get power back on as quickly as possible. They talk to people. You know, they see the damage. They, as much as anybody else, want to get restoration done. So that's the first group I would talk about. Probably the most thankless job are the men and women that are sitting in our call centers right now. If you're calling us now, you're mad. And when you get a human being, sometimes you just want to tell them how mad you are. And so these men and women now for 72 hours have been taking very nice calls and sometimes very difficult calls. We get it. People are frustrated, but handling hundreds and thousands of calls over a 72-hour period, that's tough work. And then we've got a whole support mechanism that feeds, makes sure people have a place to use the bathroom. As silly as it sounds, we got with 3,000 people outside working all over the metro. You've got to feed, you've got to get them materials, you've got to make sure they have a place to sleep at night. Many times, you know, we had to find hotel rooms for 1,000 different linemen and women who came in from all over the Midwest. So there's a whole logistical team that puts together sites like this. That are kind of behind the scenes that people don't think about, but it takes an army to supply and to fuel an army. And so if folks are unhappy with the restoration, that's on people who run the company. It's the men and women who are out here working with the public and doing the restoration. They deserve nothing but our praise.
Thanks so much, Joe.
Anything else? All right, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Might have some mics to get back.
Yeah, if you just want to drop them all down.
Yeah.
We'll collect the box.
Clip them all for you.
Okay, so if you joined us just a little bit late, I do want to provide an update on what Evergy officials just gave us, the information. They're taking a look at their website. You can see power has been restored to more than 96% of affected customers from Friday's storm. That is the latest information as of 3 p.m. today. We less than 9,000 customers out of mostly in the KC metro area. Of those out, 8,495 have been assigned and are being worked out of the total 1,853 customers or new outages as the result of the storms that moved through our area. And they also said that they do expect power in the Topeka area to be restored to all the customers who can receive it by this afternoon. As these crews finish up, they will travel to Kansas City, the Kansas City area, to assist with restoration there. I also want to take a look at this video as I provide more updates on what officials just told us. This is file video that we got over the weekend of crews out there. He did let us know that 3,000 men and women are currently working to restore power in several different areas right now. A lot of them are from Indiana, Oklahoma, Nevada, Colorado, Wisconsin, and of course the Missouri area. He also said that they hope to get a lot of the power restored tonight. They're hoping for at least 98% restored, hoping that the weather tomorrow doesn't disrupt anything as far as getting out in the community and being able to restore power. Like I mentioned earlier, they really want to make sure they're able to get out there and assist these communities during the daytime rather than at nighttime, just for their own safety. So yeah, they are keeping the weather tomorrow in mind, as we may have some more, or a risk for, or a chance for more storm activity, I should say. But he did say that as far as power outages, he does believe that most of them are due to straight line winds, at least 90 to 100 miles per hour on Friday, and trees and branches getting in the way of the systems. Now, as far as people who may have to depend on power for, let's say, their oxygen to help them breathe, he also said that those people can register for their medical list, and that just kind of lets you know when severe weather may be impacting their area, and if they can, it will prioritize those customers so that crews are able able to get to them faster to restore their power if they were to lose it. Again, that is the latest information that we just received from Evergy. Again, I want to give you all that number one more time, taking a look at their website, and then we will head over to social media, taking a look at Twitter. But power has been restored to more than 96% of affected customers from Friday's storm. And this is the latest number as of 3 p.m. You can see here 8,170 total customers are currently still without power. That number was major on Friday. Right now, I do want to take a look at Twitter. They did say that outages can be reported to this number that you see here on your screen for Evergy KC Metro. And as for Missouri customers, you can contact this number. But again, they are actively trying to restore all of the power right now, and they hope to have at least 98% restored by tomorrow morning. And of course, we will continue to keep you all posted on the latest numbers coming from Evergy.